The wind pushed the door open before he did. Hinges groaned, dust swirled in lazy ghosts, and the smell of gun oil thickened the air. Inside the gun shop, every sound carried weight. The slow tick of a clock, the faint rasp of a man breathing behind the counter, the low creak of boots on warped wood. The cowboy stepped through the haze, coat flapping, hat shadowing half his face. His boots left small storms of grit behind him. He moved like someone used to being watched. The shopkeeper straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag that looked older than the shelves. "Help you with something?" 45 cartridges, the cowboy said. His voice was low, dry as the land outside. The man nodded, but his hands didn't move right away. He kept looking at the cowboy's belt, at the revolver hanging heavy there, scuffed but oiled clean. "We don't get much call for them these days," he said, reaching for a tin box beneath the counter. "Town's gone quiet." "Quiet's a lie," the cowboy replied. The words hung there, weighty as lead. Through the shop window, the street shimmered beneath the noon sun. A horse whinnied somewhere far off. Then the bell above the door rang again. She stepped in without a sound. Black dress, wide-brimmed hat pulled low. Dust clung to the hem of her skirt like sorrow that refused to let go. Her eyes swept the room and landed on the cowboy first, sharp as a drawn blade. The shopkeeper hesitated mid-motion. "Afternoon, Miss Wren." "Afternoon," she said, not looking at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the stranger. "Those cartridges, they're not for sale." The cowboy turned his head slightly. "Didn't hear you own the place." "I don't," she said, "but I own what they're meant for." The clock ticked once, loud as a gunshot. The shopkeeper's hand trembled over the counter. The cowboy studied her, her hand resting on a worn revolver holster, the faint trace of a ring mark on her finger, the steadiness of someone who'd buried more than one dream. "You aiming to scare me off, ma'am?" "I'm aiming to keep one more ghost out of this town," she said. He almost smiled, almost. "Guess I'll have to disappoint you." Outside, the wind rose, pushing grit against the windows until it sounded like rain made of sand. Her jaw tightened. The cowboy slid a coin across the counter, the metallic ring cutting through the storm's whisper. "I just need the bullets," he said. The shopkeeper looked between them, torn between fear and habit. But before he could move, the widow's voice cut through again, softer now, haunted. "That's the same kind of ammo that killed my husband." Silence. The cowboy's gloved hand paused over the box. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then he lifted his eyes to hers, and something cold and old, passed between them. Outside, the wind died. Inside, the clock ticked once more, and the story of Red Hollow began to turn again. The door slammed behind them, dust rolling across the floor like a warning. Clara Wren's eyes never left the cowboy as she led him down the narrow alley behind the gun shop. The sun cut harsh lines across the brick walls, turning the shadows into knives. "They said he died defending a ledger," she whispered, her voice tight, as though each word might break. "Called a robbery, but it wasn't. My husband, he knew too much. Names, crimes, people you wouldn't suspect. Men wearing the law like a coat, hiding their sins under hats and badges." The cowboy's eyes flicked to the alley's end, the street stretching out empty except for the wind and a tumbleweed rolling across the boards. His gloved fingers brushed the revolver at his side, not touching, just testing. "And the ledger?" he asked. Clara's jaw tightened. "Hidden. Taken the night they killed him. I've been hunting it ever since." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle like dust in the air. Then she turned, eyes sharp, voice lower. "I don't need a man to avenge him, but I need someone who understands the weight of loss." He said nothing. His stare held hers, steady, unreadable. There was a shadow in his eyes, a hint of a past carved in fire and blood. Tattoos peeked from under his rolled sleeves, faded ink that told stories he wouldn't speak aloud. "You fought before," she said, noticing them. "You've been on the front lines, haven't you?" "Once," he admitted. "Didn't end well." Outside, the wind rose, carrying with it the rattle of a distant wagon, the whisper of hooves. Clara's hand moved to the gun at her hip, fingers brushing the worn leather. The cowboy's hand twitched toward his own, but he stayed still. A rider appeared suddenly in the distance, hat black as coal, silhouette sharp against the glare. Clara froze, heart hammering. The rider's horse slowed, deliberate, eyes fixed ahead. A mark glinted on the brim of his hat, faint but unmistakable, the same carved insignia she had seen at her husband's grave. The cowboy's jaw clenched, his hand tightening on the box of cartridges he'd carried from the shop. The alley felt smaller now, closer, tighter. "They're here," she whispered. "The ones who killed him." The wind gusted through the alley again, kicking up grit and sand, filling their mouths with taste of the desert. Clara squared her shoulders, fingers tightening around the revolver. "I can't do this alone." He studied her, the ledger's weight invisible yet heavy between them. His eyes flicked once more to the approaching rider, the sunlight glinting off metal. "Tell me where they buried him," he said at last. His voice was calm, precise, like a gun being cocked. Clara blinked, surprised, then nodded. The alley seemed to hold its breath, waiting as two shadows prepared to step into the storm. The wind howled louder, carrying the distant echo of hooves and the faint metallic ring of cartridges, ready. The ledger, the bullets, and a trail of vengeance were all about to collide. And the story of Red Hollow had only just begun. The night pressed down like a heavy blanket, the wind rattling empty shutters along Red Hollow's main street. Dust swirled through the lantern light, painting the wooden boards in streaks of orange and black. Clara Wren's horse shifted nervously, hooves scraping the dry earth as she led the way toward the old train depot. "Your husband kept it well hidden," she said, voice low, almost drowned by the wind. The ledger. Names that could burn this town to the ground. The cowboy didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes forward, scanning the shadows for movement. Then he spoke, slow and even. "I've seen men like that before. Power draped over their shoulders like armor. They kill easy and ask questions later." Clara's gloved hand tightened around her revolver. "And you?" "I walked away from it once," he said. "The wrong side of the law, the wrong orders. Some ghosts are heavier than bullets." The alley widened into a deserted square. Broken crates and overturned barrels made the ground uneven. The depot loomed ahead, its wooden boards creaking with every gust of wind. Lanterns hung from posts, swaying. Shadows leapt across the walls like living things. Inside, dust and darkness waited. Clara's boots echoed against the floorboards as she pushed open the depot door. The air smelled of rot and old iron. She knelt, lifting a loose plank with trembling hands. Beneath it lay the leather-bound ledger, edges worn, corners bent. "Got it," she whispered, sliding it into her coat. The sound of hooves outside stopped her heart. Lanterns flared in the doorway. Sheriff Kane stepped in, tall and broad, his hat casting a shadow over his scarred face. Behind him, two men fanned out, revolvers drawn. "You really think you can waltz in here and take what's mine?" Kane said, voice cutting like a knife. "That book belongs in the dirt with your husband." Clara's hand rested on the ledger. The cowboy shifted beside her, quietly sliding a cartridge into his revolver. The shadows of his past clung to him, a history etched in muscle and bone. Kane laughed a low, cruel sound. "You think a woman and a drifter can stand against us? He's wanted in 3 states. And you're alone, Clara." The cowboy's eyes met hers, steady, calm. "Then one more won't matter." The sheriff sneered, taking a step closer. "Draw if you dare." Time slowed. Lanterns swung, casting jagged light across the room. Dust motes floated like ghosts in the air, stirring as if alive. Clara's fingers brushed the ledger, feeling the weight of truth. The first shot rang out, splintering a beam above their heads. Then another. The room erupted in gunfire. Wood cracked, sand and dust erupted from floorboards, and the echoes bounced off the walls like thunder. Clara dove behind a crate, revolver in hand. The cowboy rolled, firing precise shots into the advancing men. Every movement was calculated, a rhythm born of years of danger and regret. The ledger shifted in her coat, heavy with the names of the guilty. Outside, the wind carried the echoes of hooves and shouting, the storm of dust and gunfire swallowing the depot whole. And in the chaos, the truth began to bleed into the light. Red Hollow would never be the same again. Bullets tore through the depot like angry lightning. Clara dove behind a crate, her revolver rattling with each squeeze of her finger. Dust choked the air, stinging eyes and filling lungs with grit. The ledger pressed to her chest felt heavier than lead. A shadow moved across the splintered floor, steel eyes, steady hands. The cowboy had already taken down 2 men, his movements precise, deliberate, a ghost of a soldier dancing between death and survival. His breathing was even, controlled, though his coat was already dark with blood seeping from shoulder wound. Sheriff Kane lunged from behind a broken lantern, sneering. "You think this ends here?" He spat, revolver raised. Clara rolled aside, firing once. The sheriff's grin faltered just for a heartbeat. She scrambled toward him, the ledger clutched tightly, and spoke without hesitation. "You think anyone will believe your lies? They'll see your name in this book, alongside every crime you try to hide." Kane's eyes widened, but the moment stretched too long. The cowboy stepped up, revolver steady, shadow behind him. The echo of a shot rang. Kane fell backward, eyes wide, disbelief frozen on his scarred face. The air hung thick with dust and smoke. Clara's fingers shook as she knelt beside the cowboy, pressing a hand to his shoulder. Blood soaked her sleeve. "You're hurt," she said. He shook his head faintly, voice raspy. "Ledger, take it in it right." She opened the leather-bound book, the pages illuminated by the lanterns swinging overhead. Names scrawled in ink glistened in the dust. Corrupt men, murderous hands, lawless deeds. Then her eyes caught a final entry, written in a hand she did not expect. Her breath hitched, his name inked among the guilty. The cowboy groaned, lips curling into a faint, grim smile. "I did what I had to before I could come here. Atonement, that's all I sought." Clara understood then. The man who had ridden in for bullets was no stranger, no ordinary drifter. He had been part of the corruption once, bound by orders, haunted by the lives he could not save. But he had come here, to Red Hollow, not for revenge, for redemption. Outside, the wind moaned through the broken windows, carrying the metallic scent of spent shells and desert dust. The sheriff and his men were gone, fallen or fleeing, but the weight of truth lingered. The cowboy coughed, blood darkening the dust at his boots. He tried to rise, faltering. Clara held him steady, ledger in hand. "They'll tell stories about us," she said softly, voice almost lost in the whispering wind. He smiled faintly. "Let them. Red Hollow will remember." And then he rose, slow, unsteady, a figure carved from myth and regret, disappearing into the desert night. The ledger pressed against Clara's chest, the wind carrying the echoes of gunfire, justice, and the unbroken spirit of those who fight for truth. The old storyteller's voice trembled in the memory of all who would hear it. Some say she buried him next to her husband. Others say he rode off before dawn, bleeding but alive. But everyone agrees, Red Hollow never slept easy again. A single shell lay in the dust, glinting like a promise, and the legend endured.